Star Wars is finally back on the big screen after 7 years. Is it still the big event it used to be? Today I'm watching The Mandalorian and Grogu, and we're gonna find out. I'm IndianJones, and this is a Pocket Watch review, where I watch movies without knowing the runtime and count how many times I check my watch to see if a movie's gas or ass. So I'm a decently big Star Wars fan. I mean, I got my Empire Strikes Back shirt on, but I have to be honest, I'm not as tapped into the lore as most people are. Don't get me wrong, I'm fully locked into the movies, and Andor might be one of my favorite shows of all time. And I also really like parts of the Obi-Wan show.
Hello there.
But I have to admit, I have yet to dive into the Clone Wars, Rebels, Acolyte, whatever else, even though most of it's considered top tier Star Wars. But I have watched the first 2 seasons of Mando, and season 1 had me in a chokehold. I was like, this is peak nerd television. Having every episode directed by someone new, but still have the Western, bounty hunter, lone wolf and cub through line was amazing. And season 2 was alright, but I never got into season 3 or Book of Boba Fett, even though that ended up being basically another season of The Mandalorian. I think my biggest issue was that it felt like the show was slipping and losing its identity after season 1 and was trying to fit the show into the greater Star Wars fold with bringing CGI Luke Skywalker into the finale of season 2. It was cool at first seeing Ahsoka and Luke, but I feel like we were losing scope of what made season 1 so great. I've heard season 3 covered a lot of Mandalorian lore and some stuff with Bo-Katan, which led to a weird plot and pacing of the TV show overall. I'm pretty mixed on the current state of Star Wars. Well, not really that mixed. I think post-Disney Star Wars for the most part has been more focused on selling toys and merchandise than actually making quality content. And it makes me thankful every day that Andor was somehow able to get made.
One single thing will break the siege. Remember this. Try.
I know it was supposed to be 5 seasons long initially and eventually got condensed into just 2, but I'm glad I at least live in the reality where it was made at all. Outside of Andor, the general focus seems to be that Star Wars is now for kids and the next generation, which is fine, and maybe I just need to accept that it's not being made for me anymore. There has to be a way to make content for kids while keeping depth and not just putting out products to buy, but honestly, I think Grogu has bought them runway for a decade of failure. I don't know if you guys watch Skeleton Crew. It follows a group of kids traveling through space, but it was basically Goonies vibes in the Star Wars universe. But that was one show that I enjoyed where, in my opinion, they actually made quality kids content, but unfortunately, I don't think it did that well with the general population. Overall, I guess you can say I'm not fully prepped for this movie. Sorry, I haven't seen season 3 of Mando and Book of Boba Fett or Clone Wars, but I'm still going in with an open mind. I think it would be a disservice to go in thinking this movie is going to be bad, so I'm going in with hope that I can be immersed in the Star Wars world again and at least have a fun time. Let's get to my Pocket Watch predictions. I'm predicting this movie will have a runtime of 2 hours, 18 minutes. I'm also predicting I'll check the time 3 times during this movie. Let's see how it goes. Off to the movie.
We come to this place for magic.
Okay, I'm back from the movie. I predicted the runtime would be 2 hours, 18 minutes, but it ended up having a runtime of 2 hours, 12 minutes. Damn, I'm getting pretty good at this. I also predicted 3 Pocket Watch checks, and I was wrong. There ended up being 2 Pocket Watch checks. The first time I checked was about 45 minutes in, and then I checked again another 45 minutes into the movie at the hour 24 minute mark. Just a heads up, but I'm gonna get into spoilers for the rest of the video. The first check was during the gladiator sequence, and the second check was when Mando was fighting the dragon water snake in the pit when he got to the huts. Both checks were during Mando specific set pieces that didn't really land for me and had me checking the clock, unfortunately. The movie starts off with an opening fight scene that was pretty solid. It's a good cold open, starting with action right away and immerses you back in the Star Wars world. But the whole premise of this movie starts with Mando and Grogu getting sent on a mission to the New Republic to find Jabba the Hutt's son Rada in exchange for information from Rada's uncle and aunt about an Imperial warlord. They find Rada fighting for his freedom in a gladiator arena that's run by this person named Janu because he wants to distance himself from the reputation the Hutts have created. Mando and Grogu free Rada, but they don't return him to his uncle and aunt like they initially said they were going to, because Rada reveals they're out to kill him so they can remain in sole control of the Hutt Empire, even though Rada doesn't want it.
I don't want it.
And also, Rada has the information on the Imperial warlord that the Hutt twins were going to give Mando, so Mando didn't end up needing them anyways, and it turns out the guy running the gladiator games is the Imperial warlord they were looking for, named Janu Coin. Okay, quick sidebar, but I think the era where we associate cool names with Star Wars characters is officially over, because what do you mean the actor who plays Janu Coin's actual name is Johnny Coin?
Oh, the game's got it. The game's got.
Anyways, the rest of the movie, we see how Mando and Grogu respond to the wrath of the twin Hutts for being disrespectful affected by the deal not being held up. Whether it's fighting the cool bounty hunter Embo, poisonous dragon snakes, or finding a way to survive abandoned in a jungle. And then at the end of the movie, Mando and Grogu end up exactly where they started at the beginning. All things considered, there was a lot of good in this movie. It definitely addressed a lot of the issues I had with season 2 and the complaints people had about season 3 of Mando and Grogu. The movie actually had a narrow scope and only focused on the Mandalorian and Grogu and went back to the basics of what made season 1 so great. Even the opening sequence really grabs you in. I thought it was a pretty fun way of showing both Din and Grogu back in action. The action sequences for the most part were pretty solid, but overall, I think the opening sequence and the backroom fight in the bar were the highlights for me. My favorite part of this movie, though, is the middle section where Grogu's on his own for about 20 minutes when Mando's out of commission from the snake poison. Every Grogu scene was done well for the most part, outside of him being in a cage and not being able to use the Force to get out of it. That was kind of weird for me. But that section where he was alone reminded me of the episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender called Appa's Lost Days. That's the only episode that I sometimes have to skip when rewatching Avatar because it's such an emotional episode. This section of the movie was essentially a silent film of Grogu doing whatever he could to keep Mando alive, and it was honestly perfect. And it was a harsh reality Grogu has to get used to just based on the lifespans of Grogu and Din alone. Unfortunately, Grogu's going to have to experience most of his life without Din in it. So he does have to be able to handle himself and be ready for life without his dad. But yeah, watching the puppet combo of Grogu and Babu Frick and the other Anzellans was so much fun. This could have been the whole movie for me. The puppet work was so good. This was a segment that really put me back in the Star Wars world with a smile on my face the whole time. And honestly, the puppets were so good that it made the CGI segments look out of place and not quite as good. I'm just glad Star Wars still leans on using puppets and practical effects in this day and age. It was night and day watching that Grogu adventure section compared to the 3 Hutts fighting at the end of the movie. One thing that did stick out to me though is what does it say about this movie that the best section of it doesn't have Pedro Pascal or any humans in it at all? I don't know if it's by design or Pedro's fault, but still. Is it a detriment that this movie struggles with its main human actors? I don't think it was any of the actors' faults because they didn't really get enough time to breathe and actually act, but those parts were a tough watch, I'm not gonna lie. The double-edged sword with the Mandalorian is that by nature, Pedro Pascal has to have the helmet on the whole time and we don't get to see his face or see him act, so it ends up being pretty tough. I wish I was able to time how long he actually had the helmet off in the movie, but it couldn't have been that long. How can we see any level of acting with it on? At that point, it could have just been a voiceover with a stunt double. It's a bad time to be a Pedro Pascal movie fan because there's been a lot of talk if he can be a movie star, not just a TV show guy, and it recently seems like he's been better for TV because the run of movies he's been in has been pretty lackluster overall. You can question whether or not it's his fault or not, but you can't argue with the reception of the last few movies he's been in. I honestly don't think this movie is his fault because he does what he can from the script that he was given. It is funny though that he's been 0 for 3 in Gladiator situations. The Gladiator pit in this movie felt a bit bland for me. His role in Gladiator 2 was also and the Game of Thrones Gladiator scene was actually great, but he got himself killed, so yeah, 0 for 3. It was a similar thing with Jeremy Allen White too. I don't know why he even signed up for this movie. He plays Rada the Hutt, a large slug alien, so he doesn't even look like Jeremy Allen White, which is fine, but he doesn't sound like him either. I could kind of hear him if I focused, but there was also a lot of layered audio processing, and overall it quite literally just sounded like a phoned in performance. Sigourney Weaver was also another performance that was just so flat and boring. Like, why even sign someone as famous and talented as her on if you're just gonna have that small of a role that just felt shoehorned in? If you're not gonna give her any depth or let her contribute in more of a meaningful way, why have her here at all? Funnily enough, the one actor I enjoyed was Martin Scorsese. He played a 4-armed alien street vendor that Mando got information from, but it was also a bit hypocritical. Like, wasn't this the dude that was shitting on Marvel for not being cinema? He said these franchise blockbusters were more of theme park attractions that push out small indie filmmakers from actually making content. So I was like, what are you doing here in a Star Wars film? It's funny because he's still right about these franchise movies. They're 100% becoming more like theme parks these days. One of my biggest issues was that a lot of the plot and dialogue felt like it was sacrificed because of the excessive focus on the narrow scope. Even though the narrow scope was something me and a lot of other fans were asking for, this seemed like a massive overcorrection. They boiled everything down to the most basic plot points and made it so we were just going from one set piece to another without real thought on how we'd get from point A to point B with no real conflict. I couldn't take the Twin Hutts seriously at all as villains. The bounty hunter Embo was great though. We just needed more screen time from him. But yeah, that's why it felt pretty boring in some of the bigger set pieces like the Gladiator scene or the pit scene. I was like, okay, this just feels so formulaic and boring. They didn't give any characters interesting dialogue or character depth, which is what truly made season 1 great. And there were no emotional beats that landed for me. You could tell when they wanted you to feel sad with the music swelling, but I don't think there was a single point outside of the solo Grogu moments that any of it landed because the stakes never ever felt real. You can have a basic plot while still having good character growth and stakes that actually feel real, but we were missing all of that. It seemed like they didn't want to use the movie to grow the characters at all. Grogu had some growth in that 20 minutes he's alone, but Mando is the same person at the start of the movie. And location-wise, Mando and Grogu quite literally start and end the movie exactly in the same spot. It's probably due to the meta problem of having a TV show and a movie with the same specific characters. On one hand, we have a movie that can't refer too much to the 3 seasons of its accompanying TV show out of a fear of alienating the general movie-going fan base. But that means, on the other hand, for watchers of the TV show, you really don't have to watch the movie either because it doesn't refer to the TV shows at all. And maybe it's because of the criticism they got for making the TV show too much of a greater scope, but this feels like it's backwards. Shouldn't TV shows be where you do more of the character-driven deep dives, while movies are where the bigger events happen in shorter runtimes? It feels weird that we got Luke Skywalker on the Mandalorian TV show, but not in a Mandalorian movie. I'm not saying that's what we need in movies, but it does feel backwards and is ultimately what gave this movie a TV show feel. I already know we're gonna get a lot of people complaining that this movie should have been 3 or 4 episodes of The Mandalorian instead of a movie. The way it was written, you could almost see the breakpoints for where an episode would end and the next episode would begin. The set design also didn't feel as grand as a movie should. For the most part, we were in the same sets over and over, and it really felt like a TV show type of set. And a lot of the New Republic characters and ship sequences felt like video game cutscenes with a green screen that isn't worthy of being part of a Star Wars movie. But that is something I could have excused if we had better writing to go with it. But if both the visuals and the writing are bad, what are we even doing here? It even seemed like the screenwriters were writing this for streaming rather than the big screen. Just one example is with Rod of the Hutt's character. Every time we see him on screen, it's him mentioning that he doesn't want to be his dad Jabba, or I'm my own person. I want to be different than the Hutts. I want to be seen differently and not judged by my looks. Like, we get it, but why can't you show us with his actions rather than spoon-feeding us that garbage writing? It seemed like a note for streamers. Oh, just in case you forgot this is who I am. Here you go. This whole thing makes me feel like this movie would have been better as a season of TV with the time to flesh out the plot, dialogue, and the characters. But here we are. I think the biggest issue in Star Wars is from the creative decisions the higher-ups are making, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of worried. And this isn't an original take by any means, but it's one I wholeheartedly agree with. Star Wars has changed in how it's being made. When it was first created, it was inspired by Flash Gordon, Dune, and pulled from a lot of different sources, but now we're approaching the Simpsons problem. It's basically the same issue where the Simpsons has been going on for so long that the current creators are basically inspired by the original Simpsons episodes, and it's become self-referential, and the same thing is happening to Star Wars.
It insists upon itself.
What does that even mean?
But that makes it tough to grow and adapt because modern Star Wars creators want to operate within the lines of the version of Star Wars that they fell in love with and want to pass on that version specifically. I don't think the Star Wars fandom is super kind in general though, so it's definitely a tough situation to be in. Every fan has their own idea of what Star Wars is to them, and you can't please everybody. So me personally, all I want is unique content and at least some risk-taking, but we might be at a point where Star Wars is too big for its own good. And the tough part is there are shows that I really like that tried something new and took risks like Andor and Skeleton Crew, but it clearly didn't make enough money. Under the Disney umbrella, selling merchandise and toys or whatever it is the biggest focus, and that might work out in the short term, but eventually if there isn't any good quality at all, I think the whole thing's gonna come crashing down. Before I get to my final rating, shameless plug, if you're still here and like my content and want to keep seeing more stuff like this, comment, like, follow, subscribe, whatever, at IndianJones online across all platforms. This movie had a few segments that were a lot of fun, and I think it's going to do really well at the box office, and it had the narrowed scope that a lot of people wanted, focusing mainly on Grogu and Mando. And also, great score by Ludwig Göransson, no surprise there. But I think they overcorrected a bit too much from the criticism they got about trying too hard to tie into the greater scheme of the Star Wars universe. And as a result, we got a cookie-cutter adventure film that was blander and way simpler than I would have liked. I wished I got to lean a bit more into the character development of both Grogu and mainly Din, because Grogu did have at least some growth in this movie. And the set design left a lot to be desired, and the plot was way too bland and simple for my liking. They must have had a streaming-focused screenwriter, because they had things being repeated over and over again to make sure there's no room for confusion, to the point where it felt like they were hand-holding. For me, this was a 2.5 out of 5. That's a wrap on this episode. Peace!